Happy 30th anniversary to David Fincher's second film, Se7en, which came out in 1995. I just had the pleasure of seeing this in a movie theater for the very first time. It's been remastered in 4K. It's on Blu-ray now. Some people are talking about that and a few different changes. This video is not going to be about that. I'll mention them a few times. But this is going to be a celebration of one of my all-time favorite movies. I don't have a top 10 list, but if I did, I imagine Se7en would probably be in it somewhere. And I could probably say that about a lot more than 10 movies, which is why I don't have a top 10 list. It's way too hard. Don't make me do it. I've reviewed Se7en before. Over 10 years ago. Holy shit, I have been doing this for a long time. This movie is such a superbly, impeccably crafted movie, and it has meant a lot to me over the years, not just as a fan, but as a filmmaker, and it's basically everything that I aspire to. The film is about two detectives, a rookie and a veteran, who hunt a serial killer who uses the 7 deadly sins as his motives. And just in case you haven't seen Se7en, because there are people born every day who haven't seen tons of movies, and some of them are coming of age right now, getting to the point where they might be able to see a movie like Se7en, and if you happen to be watching my channel, I'm going to talk about some spoilers. You don't want to have this ending ruined for you. It's a perfect ending. Please go see the film first. So much has been said about this movie over the years, specifically the cinematography, David Fincher's exacting vision. He made Alien 3 before this, which by his standards was a nightmare. He had a very rough time with the studio on that movie and clearly does not look at it with much appreciation. This was the movie where people really began to pay attention to him as a filmmaker, because obviously he had really made a name for himself in music videos prior to Alien 3, directing tons of award-winning videos, and say what you will about Alien 3, it's by no means an awful movie. It's still a very respectable film. It just wasn't quite what he wanted, obviously. And on this film, the studio still wanted him to change the ending, but gratefully, his actors, Morgan Freeman and Brad Pitt, backed him all the way. In fact, Brad Pitt even said he wouldn't do the film unless the original ending was maintained. And so we have now one of the best endings of all time. Why is it one of the best endings of all time? Why do people talk about it in that way? I think it's because it's not just that it's fairly unpredictable. It's that it has the guts to do what movies just didn't do then. There are plenty of films that have sad endings or downer endings, but rarely at this level, with a star like Brad Pitt at that time, Morgan Freeman coming off of The Shawshank Redemption. Of course, Shawshank became more famous over the years, but he was already an Oscar-nominated actor at that point. These are two massive stars in the middle of the 90s who are doing a big film with a director who's coming off of an Alien movie, and a lot of people were going to go see this movie, and all of them were greeted with one of the most gruesome and realistically violent movies that had ever been made, and an ending that slaps you in the face. For the entire film, Somerset, played by Freeman, mentions why he's retiring. He tells horrific stories of murders that he can't stomach anymore. He sees people on the streets being crowded by police and onlookers, and he just wants to get out of this nameless city that is filled with so much darkness and evil. And we spend most of this movie feeling like we are in a world that we can straight up smell. All of the environments in the film, especially the crime scenes, have so much grit and texture to them. The atmosphere is so thick that you feel like you understand how these rooms feel, look, and smell. It's just such an incredible achievement of production design, props, set decoration, cinematography, lighting, all of it. It's all top tier. But the fact that the ending smacks you in the face the way it does, you're expecting a hopeful ending after a movie that is so steeped in dread and cynicism and the world is bad and people are evil and there's no escape. You expect something to happen at the end to say, actually, no, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, but Se7en denies us that. Se7en says, yeah, the world is a piece of shit, and guess what? It still is, even as the credits roll. We rarely see this today outside of small independent films. All of that works great as something that we can praise as an accomplishment on film, but it's also a riveting and extremely tense finale that plays off of a great score by Howard Shore that pushes the characters into a place where even as dark as it is, the audience can still feel like they're experiencing something they've never felt before. So it works on every single level that it possibly could, as a commercial entertainment, as a film that can be studied, and as an artistic achievement for all of those who worked on it. The ending of Se7en is discussed all the time. What isn't talked about as much is the smaller character moments that are interwoven throughout the movie. Things that I think a lot of writers and even directors, and later in post-production editors, would take out of the movie because it's not important to the plot. It does nothing to propel the narrative forward. It's small moments of humor that provide context and texture to scenes that make characters into people. For instance, R. Lee Ermey taking a call at a desk that isn't his, picking it up and going, "This isn't even my desk," and hanging up the phone. What's happening during this moment? Morgan Freeman is literally summarizing the 7 deadly sins for the very first time for anybody who doesn't know. And they snuck a fun little joke in there. The idea that Mills and Somerset finally bond over a dinner table when Somerset realizes that Mills lives in an apartment that is rattled by the subway every 10 minutes or so. When they're overlooking the dead body from the gluttony kill and Mills says,
"Ladies and gentlemen, we have ourselves a homicide."
Somerset turns to him subtly, and what I read off of that is that he's looking at him like he's a Boy Scout, like he's in a movie, saying a thing that is like a movie line of dialogue. Or Mills standing there in the rain holding 2 cups of coffee that he's brought to this crime scene. We eventually realize he's just trying to make a good impression. He hands a cup to Somerset, who denies it. He sets it down on a piece of concrete. Later, he gives the other one to the crime scene cop, and he just looks at it like, why the hell would I want this? You can instantly read so much context into that scene. He's trying to make a good impression, but he doesn't really know how it works around here. None of these guys want coffee. They just looked at a gigantic dead body. Staying in the same lane here of interesting character choices that Se7en makes, but departing from it slightly, something else I love that Se7en does is it takes things that we are used to seeing in a cop or detective movie. We've seen tons of movies where somebody has to wear a wire. This movie is like, okay, we're going to dress up Somerset and Mills in a wire so that we can hear whatever John Doe is saying in the back seat. But they decide to show that they have to shave their chest hair off to stick it there, because of course they would. And they get a little joke about workman's comp and shaving off a nipple, which is very funny. Allowing these cops to feel like people. They don't just show up wearing the wire because we're all used to that. It's like, what would a person have to do if they had to put one of those on for the first time in a long time? There's also an excellent scene in the car on the way to the sloth victim where Mills is talking about how he did have to pull a gun one time, and you learn that Somerset has never even really fired a gun with intent on anybody. But Mills has this story about witnessing one of his fellow cops getting shot and how he just can't remember the guy's name. And that simple element of like, I completely forgot who that guy was. And you cut back to Somerset and he has that look like, I need to get out of this town. Everything about this job doesn't gel with him anymore. The fact that he sees all the things that he does, but that a person could actually watch someone get shot right in front of them and then just kind of forget who that person even was. As detail-oriented as we know Fincher is, there are things in the film that just feel new every single time I see them. Like, for instance, they have to show the widow of one of the victims' crime scene photos, but they don't want her to have to look at her husband's body, so they put little sticky notes on the body. It doesn't really help anything. It's almost kind of funny in a strange way. And my second favorite scene in the film, besides the ending, is this incredible moment in a bar where Somerset and Mills go back and forth about their view of people. Mills is positive that he can be that hero for somebody, that he can save somebody, that he can be the guy to bust down the door and come in there and rescue everybody. And Somerset has gotten to that point in his career where he's like, that person doesn't exist as much as you want to believe that they do. That's a myth. And this back and forth is so strong, and it's even stronger because it's coming mostly from Mills actually making a few really good points in this scene. Because the entire film, Somerset is the wise, older, sage character who can look at Mills and be like, you're too young, you don't get it, this is not the way the world works, and one day you'll understand that. But in this scene, Mills makes a pretty good point where he essentially says, I don't think you believe any of those things at all. I think you want to believe them because you're quitting. Whenever people talk about Se7en, I always hear the exact same things. What's in the box, the ending of the movie, the cinematography is very dim and dark, and it's just a very gross and violent movie. No one ever talks about how brilliant the character work is and how incredible the writing for those characters is. Because as much as the film is a technical achievement, I would feel nothing really if I didn't care so much about these guys and watching them try to work out their lives. It isn't even about solving the case. That stuff is the marketable stuff. That's the thing that got the movie made. You tell a studio, I want to make a movie about the 7 deadly sins, and a guy's going to be killing people in that way, and there's crime scenes. You get Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman, and they're very excited about that. And that movie could definitely work. There are plenty of serial killer films, even with Morgan Freeman, when he played Alex Cross, Kiss the Girls, and Along Came Spider. Those movies work just fine, but they're nowhere near the level of Seven because Seven takes its time with its characters. It allows these people to feel like people and actually exist in a world and not just be characters that move from story point to story point, because that could totally work, and Seven would still be a damn good movie. Also, here's a fun tidbit that's been pointed out before, but maybe you didn't know about it. John Doe is established in the film as having a limp, seen here in the chase scene. And later, when they're at the leather shop interviewing Wild Bill, he mentions the guy who ordered the unique piece had a limp, and just outside the window in this very scene is a man with a limp watching Mills and Somerset. In any other film, I might write this off as an overly excited background actor, but with David Fincher at the helm, I know this was meant to be. I want to talk briefly about the so-called changes that Fincher applied to this 4K remaster of the movie, because some people have mentioned them online. Essentially, he did some tracking for like Brad Pitt a few times to sort of align the camera work with him a little better. Honestly, I've seen this movie many times. Seeing it in the theater, I really only noticed the camera tracking thing. I noticed it like twice. All of the other changes really did fall into the background for me. This is by no means a Star Wars special edition kind of thing. A person could watch this movie for the first time who had never seen Seven, and they would have no idea that there were any changes. Nothing about the story, nothing about the characters, the structure would be altered in any significant way at all, not even in a minuscule way. This is nothing like that. This is the kind of technical, obsessive stuff that we know Fincher does, and maybe that's why people are irritated by it, because nobody really needs it except him. But you know what? At the end of the day, as much as we often preach that when a film is released to the audience, that it's no longer the filmmakers, now the audience own it, yes, in some ways that is true, but truthfully, a filmmaker who made the movie, it's always going to be their movie. So they have the right to make these changes if they want to, and I don't think they affect the movie at all. Seven looked incredible on the big screen. It is one of my favorite theater experiences I've had recently. Obviously, I love this movie. I hope you guys do too. If you've never seen Seven and you watch this video, okay, man, why? Go watch it though. It's absolutely one of the best movies that's ever been made, and I don't think it's overhyped at all. I think that it's one of those things where it really will stick with you. And if for some reason it doesn't 100% gel with you on first viewing, I do think that it's a type of film that gets better and better and better and better every time you watch it. Guys, thank you so much as always for watching. Look forward to more videos very soon. And if you like this, you can click right here and get Stuckmanized.